always assumed Minneapolis was super safe. All the nice people, nice Scandinavian types.
Minnesota nice. It was. It used to be.
They bring you key lime pie when you move into their neighborhood.
Yeah, well, that's how it was, until recently.
When the fuck did that change?
90s. 90s is when it started changing. That's when they started, just like everything. I mean, 60s was a big change, and the 90s was another big change. 60s was like a cultural change to kind of make people accept these ideas. And then in the 90s, they actually really started kicking up the immigration. That's when it really started kicking up. And I remember reading back, even when I was a kid in New Jersey, there was a New York Times Magazine article. I remember this was on the kitchen table in my house for like a week because, those magazines will last a week, or on the side table in the living room where the magazines would be stacked.
Oh, you mean the virtue signal props?
Well, see, yes, somewhat, but these were also stuff that would be read. This was not like a Ta-Nehisi Coates book that no one reads. Like, people would read the New York Times Magazine. And there was an article in there, and I'd love to go back and try and find this one from sometime in the 90s in the New York Times Magazine. It must have been the 90s, because I only remember reading it in my parents' old house in New Jersey. And it was about Minneapolis as a place where they are putting Somalians. It was literally about moving Somalians into Minnesota.
American blacks, because George Floyd wasn't a Somalian.
Right. I understand that, but the diversity in Minneapolis, first of all, though, the Somalians do a lot of the shootings and the crime in Minneapolis. It's not like they're innocent of it. George Floyd was not Somalian, but the black problem in Minneapolis has been significantly exacerbated by the Somalians. So
I heard that
you have this mix.
The Somalis break out into tribal groups and
I would not be surprised if the Somalian blacks and the American blacks have gang wars and shit like that.
Like blacks yo, these niggas retarded. What do you do at that school? Because usually the black kids are in the special ed class. Where do you put the Somali kids?
It's like the special ed. It's like even more special.
Super special ed class.
Yeah. Well, special ed. When I was a kid, special ed was like retards. And then they had, I guess they're now called special needs. So special needs, you had to be actually retarded. They had they call something a resource room. That was where they put the black kids, in the resource room. And some schools would have a padded room for calming them down. If they got too worked up, they put them in a padded room so they couldn't hurt anybody.
Not a padded room.
Dude, there are schools that have my school didn't, but I think Jesse was telling me his school had a resource room that had a padded room to put these black kids in when they would spaz out too much and they couldn't take it. I mean, look, it's just how it is. We laugh, but it's the truth. This is how the world works. This is the world. No, you have to laugh. It's funny.
American needs a canned laughter track.
Yes,
because it's a sitcom.
It's a big joke, but it's also it's like dark jokes, because a lot of times the jokes stop being funny. I mean, another funny joke was when I heard about Britain is also rapidly Americanizing. Britain is going to be the country that Americanizes fastest. Yeah. And all English speaking countries, and then of course it's going to go to Western Europe and then to Eastern Europe. But Britain had this BLM activist, and in some ways the blacks in Britain speak out even more, because in some ways they're more cucked over there, because there's not as much free speech, and it's not really, you can't really compare those though, because it's all different points on the same spectrum.
Well, the Muslims, did you see those videos of Muslims in trucks trying to run curly Jews down and shit?
Yeah, well, that was happening in America. That was happening in America.
Way more radical in Britain than in America. Way more radical.
Well, the interesting thing, I don't know about black violence. I think they have it, but they don't have the gun violence because it's harder to get guns there. I think they have some. They do have some gun violence because this woman was shot in the head. But for example, they have on the BBC, they'll have these woke blacks talking about white slavery and shit like that on shows on the BBC and things like that, or Sky News or whatever. They have these little chat shows. They call them in Britain chat shows. Yeah, the chat shows. And what they do is just blacks chatting about white genocide. And And they talk about, like, we're talking about ending the white race. And I remember they had this fat black lady on one of these shows that went around very much on Telegram and Twitter and social media where she's talking about, like, ending the white race. And then she's like, oh, but it doesn't mean white people. It's just like whiteness. And it's like, yeah, I don't buy that bullshit distinction. Like, fuck you. If I were to talk about ending Jewishness, and I meant, like, no, I don't mean the people, the actual individual humans that are Jewish. I mean, like, the Jewish identity. First of all, Jews would rebel very hard against ending their identity, if not their physical persons, and they would never admit that there was that such a distinction was valid. So I see no reason, nor would blacks, nor should anybody.
Because a guy in London put up an Israeli flag with a swastika on it and said he supported Hamas, and he's being prosecuted for hate speech. So,
right. So here's my thing.
What happens.
Now, on top of that, people complain in Britain. And in America too, but in Britain it's more so because in America there is a bit of a free speech out depending on how things happen. Like, you can get your life ruined, you can get your job taken, your house and all that stuff because of your money and your livelihood. But the state sometimes now that's changing because the state will come down on you, but they need some other excuse like buying a solvent trap or something like that, right?
Yes.
But if you just say something, maybe you can be okay. But generally speaking, it's a little bit more totalitarian speech-wise in Britain, but that's not to say the United States is better off. It's not. It's just, like I said, different points on the spectrum depending on what the powers that be, the Jewish elites and their goy toadies think they can get away with. Yeah. So, but here's the thing. If you thought that it was, and I could see why if you were British, you might think, well, it seems that white British, native Britons, native British people, British, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, these people, don't get mad at me about that. You know what I mean? The people of the British Isles are under attack in their own countries, and brown people that aren't from Britain, Pakistanis, Arabs, Muslims, Africans, all these people have an advantage over them. And that's true. However, and if you were to say, like, well, why can't we get, when Pakistani rape gangs are raping and grooming young girls, why can't we get them in trouble? Why can't we get them arrested? When white people are attacked in the street, when they're knifed or they're beaten, why can't we get any outrage? Why can't we get these people to do anything? Right. Well, you know how you do it. You know how you do it. And if you say anything to one of these people, like, there's these times when, someone gives a dirty look to a brown person, a non-native British person on the bus or on the train, on the tube, as they call it, on the underground, they'll get arrested. And, or if someone, God forbid, they say, like, hey, go back to your own country, then, oof, boy, there's going to be, like, cops are coming down on zip wires and stuff. Yeah. And so
it's really fucked up.
It's really, really fucked up.
Or if you use someone